this week. We'll talk about that one. The Winter Olympics come to a conclusion this weekend, so we'll talk about that. And we'll talk about a big crisis in the UK. KFC has run out of chicken. Bit of a fundamental problem for a company called Kentucky Fried Chicken. So we'll talk about that as well. And anything else that catches our attention. So let's start with you, Amber. Gannett split into two, I think last year.
It was actually almost 3 years.
Oh, that's 3 years.
2.5.
There you go. So I've already failed. See, I told you we prepped for these.
That's okay. We'll guide you through it.
But I think not everyone understands what
Right.
happened and what the two parts do. So do you want to quickly explain that?
Absolutely.
And put it into context.
Yeah. So I actually started at Gannett about 5 years ago, and we did a little over 2.5 years ago split into two companies. And so Gannett was for a very long time basically a holding company and had brands like USA Today, you know, this iconic national brand. At the time, I think it was about 90 local publishing assets, and then a lot of local television broadcasting assets, but not a lot of cohesion amongst the broadcasting assets.
So
not,
radio as well? Was it mainly
no,
TV?
just
Okay.
TV. But so the decision was to split the broadcasting assets off. That company became Tegna. We remained Gannett, and me as a PR person decided here is the more interesting story. Definitely, I think as industry would see it, probably the more challenged, but I saw a very unique opportunity to tell the story of this local to national, and I had been at Yahoo before this, which, you know, you see so many brands trying to be successful at this national and local situation, and a lot have failed. So we actually do have this amazing national iconic brand and this amazing footprint, and we've added to that local footprint since then. So
tell us a bit about that and how you are telling the story now, because I think USA Today, you know, I guess traditionally people might have seen that as the paper that gets tucked under their hotel room door, or, you know, sorry, I'm being open. And you don't necessarily pay for it, but it seems to have transformed itself into much more of a digital product over the past couple of years, and a bit more investigative reporting. So tell us a little bit about that and how the brand's evolved and where it fits in the national media landscape.
Right, absolutely. So when I was brought in, that was one of the big challenges that I had to tackle was, you know, getting rid of this legacy thinking about the brand and showcasing all of the amazing things that we were doing on the digital side, and even with emerging technologies. I mean, we were actually one of the first news brands to tackle virtual reality and won the first journalism award in virtual reality. But trying to tell this story is, you know, one, we had tried to harness the brand name Gannett, and as I was saying earlier, you know, many people in the country don't know what that brand name is or perhaps mispronounce it, so we look to use the power behind that USA Today brand name and really create this network where it is this cohesive network of national and local brands rather than just separate, disparate pieces that don't function together.
So it's the USA Today network, which comprises USA Today, but what we would have called local newspapers all around the country.
Local publishing assets, yeah. So they all have digital brands as well. But the great thing is, you know, stories many times don't start from a national landscape, right? But we actually do have feet and relationships on the ground that can tell these stories. Like one of the most powerful was, it was actually one of our local brands that broke the story on Larry Nassar in the USA Gymnastics, and that clearly became a very national and international story. But
and that was the Indianapolis paper, right? Yeah, the Star.
Yeah.
So in a situation like that, where one of your, I don't want to call them properties, but one of your media outlets breaks a big story like that, what does that mean for you? I mean, how do you jump into action after that?
And you know, looking back, it was crazy because we actually, well, you can imagine reporters are, you know, stereotypically curmudgeon-y group, so we've won them over, and, you know, we work closely with them, we love them, but...
Yeah, this is as outgoing as we get.
Trying to convince them to bring us into their world and, you know, realize that they could trust us with their hard-earned work. You know, if you've been working on a story like that for months or years, you're very reluctant to, you know, share that before you're ready to publish. So that was actually one, you know, because this was back in 2015, I think, that the story actually broke locally, but they were a little nervous to share that they had this, and I think at first they didn't realize what a big piece of information this was. And so, we helped promote it a little bit. The network on the editorial content side promoted it a little bit, and then you see that, this is not just a local conversation with one local source. This is a very big story.
Does it get picked up by the national, by USA Today and the other local outlets as well? And if so, did they get it at the same time or a little bit afterwards?
Yeah,
How does that work?
so they definitely work on the back end, and I think that one may have been a little bit different because it did start quite locally, but many times they will work on investigative pieces where, we've got a bit of information like, the Detroit water situation, and, they think that can't possibly just be going on in Detroit. So as a network, they'll get together and say, okay, what if we all went out and kind of investigated in our own markets and communities if this was happening, and then collectively we'll come together and create a big national piece out of it.
Yeah, in fact, you went on Pulitzer, didn't you, for one of your investigations, and maybe people don't really necessarily associate USA Today with investigative journalism. So is that something you're doubling down on, quality and longer form or more in-depth works? Excuse me.
That's been a huge focus, and actually we just announced a new editor-in-chief for USA Today, Nicole Carroll, who comes from one of our local properties, the Arizona Republic, and I think she got great kudos in the newsroom by saying, this is huge differentiator for us, and it's really important for our community, so we're going to keep on. We actually interviewed Joanne Littman 6 months ago. So what happened with her? Because she didn't really stay very long. So no, but I mean, Joanne has an amazing opportunity. She's got this book coming out that was just, in the right place at the right time. And she clearly, you've met her, she's a force and she's amazing. So, I think she thought if I wanted to give all the attention to this book and promote it in the right way, and, I think the publishers upped the date a little bit because of everything that was going on in the news, and she decided this was the time to, go and do that right.
Yeah, in fact, I think it gets published in the UK today under a different title. From my research. So to be fair, it is very timely. On a purely, this might be a bit dull, but on a purely nuts and bolts level, do all the publishers have the same content management system, and can they dip in and take each other's stories, or is that a bit of a pipe dream and is everyone on their own system? and it's how do you make that work?
Yeah, it was a pipe dream, but it is functional now. So yes, it is one system. They function as one news organization. Wow. And they've been great about, let's look at the data, and see what is being read and what our consumers want. And so they do really function as one with one function.
Again, a bit of a cultural shift for
sure.
Newsrooms to cede complete control over their copy, and it might get edited in a different way when it gets picked up, or, on a different title or on a different website. So okay, so how do you? We all know media is a tough business. How are you making money, and how is that working? And because we have fewer journalists, everybody does,
right.
And you've got to try and do better quality and more content with fewer people, which is kind of difficult.
It is difficult.
So how are you approaching that?
Yeah, so I think to go back to the one comment that we were just talking about, that is if you have less resources, then really look at what people are reading and what they want and focus on that versus trying to do the please everybody with everything. That's not going to work, right? We do have less resources, but the great thing is, if you're a local market, then you have this backup and support of the entire network behind you that you might not have had before. And then we can, cut out some of those operational costs because, like you said, one content system. You're not replicating that 109 times around the country. You've got one and you're functioning from one place. So that definitely helps.
So how is it doing communications in a media environment? Because that is a special
busy
sort of place. Dealing with a lot of curmudgeonly journalists, as we've already, and editors. How is that working, and what sort of things have you been doing and bringing in?
Yeah, it's really busy because you're managing the promotion of news, right? But at the same time, you're managing the promotion of a company and what the business is doing. So it's really these two sides. But to promote the news side of it, we actually as a business have broken down into this business to consumer, which is, a big part of that consumer side is the content and the experience of the consumer. And then business to business, which of course is, how those brands that market and advertise with us function. And we have won over a lot of the journalists and actually sit in their editorial meetings with them. And, there's something that, like this Larry Nassar story at the Indy Star, they might not think it's a big deal, but, you're hearing it from a different perspective and, might have a little one-on-one with them afterwards and say, what can we do here? And so a lot of the promotion that we will work on is, we got to focus on national because we just don't have the bandwidth to really drill down into the local outlets. But, we have great partnerships with national broadcasting and different shows that then we can say, okay, great.
Put your journalists or editors on.
Right. Let's give an exclusive to a Today Show or some national news show that will help amplify your story and bring some eyeballs to what you're doing. So it's been very effective.
And what about editors or journalists as experts on general issues, or politics or sports or whatever,
Yeah.
Have you made some progress?
Huge. It used to be, when I walked in the door, that was a very reactive process. So we had some that were great about building their own brand, but that has been a huge focus over the last, 3 to 5 years, is building those individual brands. And like we have Susan Page that is just an icon in Washington, D.C. So she's a one-woman show, but, lots of others. I mean, we have a great tech journalist. We have huge on sports with the Olympics right now and all that kind of stuff. So that has been a very fun process, too, to help build those individual brands that feed up to the larger brand.
And what should PR pros know about pitching the Gannett network? They can't really go through you because
right. Please don't go through me, which I get.
Your journalists, your editors will be like, no.
Yeah. Find the right reporter. But I think the 101 of PR, which I'm sure you guys know, is. Really think about it from the reporter's perspective, right? Like, how can you help them do their job, not asking for a favor for coverage, but, I jokingly say sometimes it's probably harder for us to pitch stories to our own reporters than it is to some of the other publications. But, in a way that's good because they're not just blindly, taking what we feed them. They're really being good reporters and making sure it's relevant to their audience and that they're covering it in a way that makes sense for them.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
We don't really have a corporate comms department, but if our sales department comes and pitches a story to you, Frank, you'll always listen with me.
What sales department? No.
Stone-faced.
Make your pitch right here.
All right, yeah, great, interesting stuff, and we'll talk a little bit about what. I mean, I hate this term, fake news, because to me, and in fact, Joanne Littman in her interview with us said, don't even use that phrase. It's fake content. There's no such thing because news is
news.
is truth. So, but clearly it's affected everyone.
Yeah.
Everyone who does content, and the platforms like Facebook and Google are being held feet to the fire, not before time, a little bit more.
Yeah.
What's your take on that in terms of Gannett and your properties?
Yeah, it's a challenge and it's hard because our reporters and our brands take pride in what they do and they are true journalists, and I think the journalism awards and the history certainly prove that, but I feel like it's kind of probably the generation right before this when they were learning to do, reports in school and what valuable and actual resources were. Like Wikipedia doesn't count. A tweet that you find on the internet is not legitimate. So I feel like
pitch Frank Washkuch with facts from Wikipedia. Advice to PR Week's new senior reporter.
So I feel like we are going through this debate of true, what are true news outlets, and people need to understand what that is and go to the real ones and
Yeah, in theory it's an opportunity. It's just so noisy and there's so much. Social media has changed everything, and Russian bots from everything downwards, and just propaganda, and I think USA Today has more of a bipartisan sort of reputation rather than some of the Fox Newses or MSNBCs, which I think is good. I mean, personally, I think it's good because that's how journalism should be. But these days people do want strong opinion, don't
Yeah.
they? So
Yeah.
you've got to strike that balance.
Yep.
I guess. Yeah, fascinating stuff. Could talk all afternoon, but let's move into some news stories, Frank.
Sure.
The Parkland High School students, another terrible school shooting. Not going to get into the whole gun rights issue, but there is a communications angle here. I'm not trying to lessen the lives of the people who died, but the kids have really made an impact, haven't they?
Yeah,
Because
they've been,
the way they've responded, and they've really, talking about school walkouts and going to talk to the president, and they really want to make some change.
I think most people think they've been very impressive in both the amount of poise they've had in the days after, which can't be easy at all, but also in the way that they've communicated their views, very articulately. And I think a lot of people have pointed out this is a generation that's been using smartphones really their whole well, they're not even really adults yet, but they're really since they were small kids. So and they're very comfortable with that. They're very comfortable with video and social media, and I think it tends to show.
Yeah, for sure. Do you have any outlets down in that area?
We do, yeah, we do. But I would even add to what Frank was saying, and it's, I think of the old, there's nothing more powerful than a woman scorned, and I saw some meme that, kind of was like, there's nothing more powerful than a teen, that has mobile and social access, and dang, they're using it.
And there's, and it makes me think a little bit because we're still in that winter season, just like post-trust barometer with at Davos. But these surveys and polls always talk about who's an authentic spokesperson, and with the kids who survived this shooting, I mean, it's hard to get more authentic than that because these kids have been through such an ordeal. They know so many people who were hurt or affected or in one way or another by it that you can't get more experts than that. And they're also, they don't come across as partisan in any way. They don't come across as one party or another. They just kind of want a solution to this.
I think that's an I really agree with that point, and you can see that. I blogged about this last Friday, even at the Olympics with people like Chloe Kim, fantastic role models, and they're not interested in getting involved in these debates about politics and partisanship and even nationalism. They see their fellow competitors as peers and friends, and as it's not about my country at the expense of all others. It's about everyone joining together at the Olympics, is what's so great about the Olympics, and just celebrating, not even just celebrating winning, but celebrating being part of that. And that's, we're coming on to the Winter Olympics, and that to me is one of the great things about the Olympics and truly global sporting events like the Soccer World Cup. I'm making a trifecta here, aren't I?
You haven't mentioned that. You haven't mentioned that before on a podcast, and I'm surprised to hear about it.
But tell us about the Winter Olympics. There's some big storylines.
So we're wrapping up this weekend.
Congratulations to the U.S. women's hockey team on
huge.
winning in overtime.
I did not stay up to watch it, but I heard it was exciting.
Yeah, that would have been a late finish, I think.
The highlights looked exciting. But is it fair to say it's been a down year for the U.S. team? There's been a lot of talk about disappointment on social media that it hasn't been the best year. It's been a great year to be a Norwegian.
It has. And that's been kind of delightful the way they've approached it as well.
Yeah.
But does that diminish it because the US hasn't done as well, or is it still? Lindsey Vonn was one of the big stars, wasn't she? She got the bronze, and then she sort of clipped her last appearance, ended in disappointment, I think. I don't know.
I don't think it's disappointing. But I think if you're into keeping a horse race track of the medal table, it might be.
Yeah.
But that's about it.
Yeah, no, I love some of the storylines like the Nigerian bobsled team.
Yeah.
The story we did about the Jamaican bobsled team and Red Stripe stepping into, fairly opportunistically, let's be honest.
But that was fun.
Yeah.
And I feel like good for them in a way.
Yeah.
It wasn't like it was some non-Jamaican brand that tried to step in and it just didn't work. I think it worked for Red Stripe.
Yeah, so I like it, celebration, and also it's celebration of youth, but also some participants a little closer to especially your age, but to my age.
Not my age.
Not as much anymore. Not as much as 4 years ago.
Skiers and,
Right. There were some amazing comeback stories.
Yeah.
Shaun White and Lindsey Vonn both. And was it Nathan Chen, the men's skater who, not great out of the gate, but came back and.
That's one
fabulous.
sport, the skating events, where because they're very nervous and a lot of them are incredibly young. And, you know, if you try to do it, I'm not that I've ever tried to do one, but doing a triple or quadruple spin on the ice, you know, it's all or nothing, isn't it?
Right.
And I was watching some of the young people competing in that, and there's a lot of pressure on them. It's a bit different to just sort of going as fast as you can downhill. But no, I think it's been fascinating. I don't know, what do you think, Amber? Has it been... How much of the interest in it as a media event is generated by US involvement?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've had a big play in it. You know, it is hard as a media company when you don't have the rights to the event, but, you know, certainly copious amounts of footage and intrigue and interviews. So.
And how many journalists do you have over there?
Oh, boy. Over there? I don't want to throw out a number.
Okay.
But it is a large crew of people, yeah.
Yeah, it's been I know I've enjoyed it, and I still don't understand this thing about false snow. The downhill run is clearly false snow because they pan back and the mountain is bereft of snow, and it's made it a slightly odd, quite a challenging route down. I've never skied. So I'm completely, as you can probably tell, I'm talking completely off the top of my head. But you know, it looks like it's been super cold and there's been all these challenges and what have you. Anyway, it's been fun and there's been some good storylines, and we discussed some of them. Frank,
yes,
tell us about the big chicken crisis in the UK.
Well, it's simple. There is none. A supply issue has meant that KFC has had to close hundreds of stores in the UK because they can't get the chicken to the restaurants, which is a problem. So KFC has handled it in a very self-effacing manner and won some kudos, shall we say, for the way they've handled it so far.
They have. Tell us what they did, because they did. But it's a tricky subject, that, isn't it? When you run out of chicken, when you're a chicken retailer.
Yeah, that can be a big issue. So it's one thing that the folks that our colleagues in the UK have talked to is that it's really going to be one of these situations where they have to make up for it in the months ahead. You know, is there another issue? You know, can they sort of rebound, so to speak? So that seems to be where the main challenge will be coming up.
Apparently the Colonel's on it, though. According to social media.
Well, which Colonel?
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
I think the other interesting part about this is obviously KFC's a franchise business, so a big audience for KFC is their franchisees who are furious. Their businesses here, they can't do business, so they're the people who are losing a fortune, and they definitely included them in their communications.
Yes.
Thanking them for their patience, etc. But yeah, that's fairly fundamental when you run a chicken company to run out of chicken. So,
but they have been brilliant on the social media side. It was the Twitter following 5 Spice Girls and 6 guys named Herb. So
that was
they've
very
cornered
good.
the market on that front.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a good example of a good response, but you know, it also makes that point that people talk about PR crises. That's a operational business crisis when you run out of the product that you sell and can't get it to your distributors, to your outlets. So and then the PR people come in and have to clear it up. It doesn't make it a PR crisis. That makes it an operational crisis. So we always have to make that clear. All right. So well, we're up at 25 minutes. So thank you, Frank. Thank you, Amber. It's great to chat, and good luck with everything over at USA Today Network. And good to see the way the company's evolving, actually. And good to see, media companies. Hopefully, do you think we've reached the bottom? It's only up now, and you can't really trim a lot more.
I don't know. I think it depends on the brand, right? The ones that are going to pivot fast enough and figure it out. Yeah.
There's still some bad news this week from media generally about job losses and closures on broadcast and
even some new media. Yeah.
Yes. Well, that's a good point, actually.
Though it's interesting that the Atlantic is hiring.
Yeah, they're hiring 100
people.
100 people.
That's really something, considering they still sort of have that old stodgy reputation in a lot of ways. So
it's great what they're doing, and people like Axios, great new outlets. So we're rooting for you, as we are for ourselves.
Thank you. We're in it together.
Yeah. All right, so a couple of customer service announcements. We've got our big PR Week US Awards, the Oscars of the PR industry. They're on March the 15th in New York City at Cipriani downtown. Please snag your ticket if you haven't already done so. There's a few left. The Brand Film Festival is on the 3rd of May, and that is running in New York City as well at the Paley Media Center. In fact, we did some work with USA Today on that to promote that, so thank you for doing that. And, we didn't really talk about custom, but I guess that's a growing part of your business as well. So that's been a fantastic brand extension for us, and a real great showcase of cinematic storytelling. And then we've got our global awards in London on the 15th of May. So do make sure those are all on your calendar. But that's all we've got time for this week. We'll see you next time on the PR Week.